So when was the first time that you made it?
Well, it was many years ago, and you know your grandfather, my husband, was of Russian descent. Both his mother and father were born in Russia and came to the U.S. where they met, actually. When my husband was small, they were very poor, so they had it a lot because she could go to the butcher and just say, give me some soup bones. And in those days, they would give you soup bones. And because they knew her, very often they would have them quite meaty for the family because they knew that she was feeding the family. So my husband had it a lot more than just the holidays. At any rate, my mother-in-law wanted me to learn how to make it. She said, because someday I won't be here. And so we were living in San Carlos at the time, and she came and she said, I'll spend a couple days here and we'll go to the store and do the whole thing. So she taught me, and I would say that was, I'd have to think back how long ago we lived in San Carlos, but I remember she came there. I just don't remember how many years ago that would have been. Maybe 30, at least. And so, funny thing, she said, now you have to remember, when I was a little girl, we had to use the regular beets. You would go to the grocery store and buy red beets. So then you had to come home and you had to cook them and peel them. And if you've ever cooked red beets, they make a big mess because everything gets red. And so she said she found, after years of doing this, that it was a lot easier to go to the grocery store and buy canned beets. And so she told me, she said, it's just as good and you don't have quite the mess. So from then on, we used the canned beets. And that's how the soup began. And we started having it on Christmas Eve many years ago when the kids were small. And when my children, Andy, Bill, and Beth, were little, they really weren't all that thrilled about the soup. But as they grew up, they all got to like it. And now even the grandchildren like it. They didn't like it much at first either, but they grew into it. And so we all enjoy the borscht for Christmas Eve. It's become a tradition in the Pakoda family. For the soup, I do like to get, they're called soup bones because they have a lot of bone and a little bit of meat on them. And also the short ribs. There's bone and there's good marrow inside of here for the soup flavoring. So we'll put all this meat in here and then we will add the water. You need a pretty good sized pan if you're making a lot of soup for the family. And I just basically cover the meat and we will put it on the stove and we'll turn it on high for now. Put the cover on it. When it comes to a boil, then we can turn it down to simmer or just so it's just boiling a little bit. And this has to cook now probably 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. You can check it to see if it's really tender or if it's falling off the bones. But basically, you cook it about 4 hours. Okay, it looks like this is boiling, rapidly boiling now, so we want to turn the heat down. Let's get it down underneath the water there. See, all this stuff comes off the meat, and that's why we'll strain it later when it's, but that looks like it's just bubbling enough to keep it cooking. So that should be ready in about 4 hours. After we have the broth all ready to go, we can peel the potatoes. I have 3 here, but I think maybe 2 is going to be enough. But at any rate, peel the potatoes and dice them. And then I have a head of cabbage here, and this is more than we need. Probably half of this we'll use tomorrow, and that you chop fairly, not fine, but in smaller pieces. And then the basic ingredients are the beets, and we use the julienne beets. These are pure, just in water. They don't have any seasoning on them at all. And I have 4 cans here. I actually have a couple more if I think we need them, but I don't think so. And the peas, 2 to 3 cans. And then the sauerkraut. And this is fairly important because borscht does have that slightly sour taste. But I think this is not a huge can. I probably will use a whole can of this, but I'll check it as we go along. And then we need to have a little tomato sauce, usually 2 to 3 of these smaller cans to give it a little more red color and a little bit more taste. And we get that all together and then let it simmer for about 4 hours or whenever until we're ready to eat it.
So there's not really specific measurements. It's kind of just like some of this and some of that. And,
right.
And how do you know, like, how much? Do you just, because you know, is that?
Yeah, I guess I just know. And plus, after we get it all together, I taste it. And then I know if I need even maybe a little bit of salt, which not usually because all the canned food has salt in it, and that usually takes care of the salt. And maybe I want a little more tomato sauce sometime or less if I don't put it all in at once. Hurry up, I don't want it to boil over.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like it has boiled for 4 hours now, about. And so the best thing to do is to take a nice sharp fork like this and check the meat. And oh yes, this meat is totally done. See, it's just falling off the bones. And so that's what we want. We'll take it and set it over here. And I want to get the meat out of the broth here. So I have this spoon that it has holes in it so the broth will go through. It's just falling apart, which is exactly what you want.
It smells really good.
Mm-hmm. That's all the big pieces of meat. So now, just set this aside and let it cool off a bit. And we will take the broth and strain the broth. Okay, that's cooled off enough so I can just... Okay, that's good. See, we don't need all that extra stuff from the bones in the soup, so. There we go. Over the top. I will find a place in the refrigerator for it. So that sets overnight so that all the fat will rise to the top. And then we will be able to skim that all off and we'll have a very good broth for the soup. Now I'm taking the meat and separating from the bones, and there's a lot of fat on there, so I don't want the fat. And here's all the good meat off the short ribs, which is excellent meat, and it's so tender. Nice. Ouch, ouch. It's a little bit warm yet, but that's all right. It comes off easily when it's still warm, so you want to cool it down so you can touch it, but you don't want to put it in the refrigerator, and make it cold, because otherwise it takes more time to separate the meat from the bones, and this is just about right. Tomorrow we'll finish this and the rest of the soup. Now we're going to put the meat in the refrigerator, so I'll take a piece of this saran wrap and put over the top of the plate, and that'll keep it until tomorrow, where we can take some of the meat and put it in the soup. Right now I have to wash the pan so that we have a nice clean pan to put the soup in tomorrow. Well, I have to get the broth out of the refrigerator first thing. And as you can see, the fat has all come to the top, and so we want to get that off of there. I have this slotted spoon, which helps to you don't have to get too much of the juice out. It doesn't hurt if you leave a little in there, but we just mainly want to get out the big pieces. And I'm going to pour it into the pot that we used to cook the meat. Put this on the stove. Turn it on. Because the first thing we do is get the potatoes and peel the potatoes. For this large pot of soup, I used 2 pretty good sized potatoes.
And how are you cutting them up?
I would say this is in little square pieces. I don't exactly call it diced because they're not real small. Maybe we could say bite-sized pieces. This all goes into the broth because we want to cook the potatoes a little bit. I can push them off the end of this board, but it makes a big splash, so I'll get some of them going in here before I do that. Okay, now the potatoes are in there and they'll start cooking, and we'll get the cabbage ready. Use not a whole lot of cabbage, about a half of a small head. I'll see how much this is when I get this. I throw away the outer leaves because they're a little tougher. After we let the potatoes cook a little bit to get soft, we'll add the rest of the vegetables. You just pour it right in there. That's the julienne style beets that we talked about early on. And the next thing is the peas. And the ratio is about 4 cans of beets to 2 cans of peas. Give it a little stir here. See how we're doing. Starting to look like borscht. And then the second to the last is a sauerkraut. I don't always use the whole can. This is a small can, so maybe I will. I'll just kind of check the consistency. And then the last thing is we'll add tomato sauce. I'll just add 2 cans right now. It has a lot to do with the taste, so later on, after it's cooked a while today, taste it. If I think it needs a little bit more tomato sauce, then we can add another can or 2. But basically, this is about it. The consistency looks good. There we go. Put the lid on, let it boil, and then turn it down just to simmer. And a good 3-4 hours or all day till you're ready to serve it. Okay, this has been on the stove all day, just simmering very lightly. And now I have just come over to take a little taste, because that's how I tell. It's good, but I think it needs just a little bit more tomato sauce to make it, give it just a little bit more zing. Yesterday we cooked the meat and put it in the refrigerator, and today I've got it ready to go in the soup, and we took off all the fat and gristle, and so it's pretty much just nice chunks of beef that go in the soup to add flavor and substance to it. I'll take another little taste. I think that'll do. The soup is done and we're starting to dip it up. Here we are at our annual Christmas Eve dinner, and we're having our borscht, and of course the way you serve it with this nice dollop of sour cream. So we'll pass this around, and then also the French bread is a must to go with the borscht. Cheers! 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 Doesn't hurt to have some Opus 1 with it too.
Yeah, right.